The Trump administration restoring sanctions lifted under the 2015 nuclear agreement. The move hitting Iran's oil, banking and shipping industries. It has sparked protests on the streets of Tehran, with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani vowing to resist these new measures. Joining me right now is National Security Advisor John Bolton, and it is good to see you, Ambassador. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
So tell me, really, the teeth on these sanctions. What is it going to do to Iran, practically speaking?
Well, I think the sanctions in the aggregate are already having an enormous effect on Iran. You know, when the president announced we were withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal in May of this year, big businesses that had prospects or even some trade and investment with Iran weren't going to wait for the sanctions actually to take effect. They've pulled out, they've cut back in many ways, and I think we've already seen the consequences in Iran. The rial, the currency's declined by 70% since the sanctions. Inflation has quadrupled. The country is in recession. You're seeing riots and demonstrations all around the country, just provoked by ordinary citizens. So I think this is going to cut into Iran's ability to continue their nuclear program, to finance terrorism, and to engage in military activity around the Middle East. And I think we're already seeing that.
Now, look, obviously it's taken some oil off the market, but the criticism, as the editorial board in the Journal wrote over the weekend, one complaint is that the administration has exempted 8 countries from sanctions on oil exports from Iran. Are they Japan, South Korea, China, and India?
Well, I think those are going to be announced today. Look, the president's policy here is maximum pressure. And I think what he means by maximum pressure is maximum pressure. The aim is to drive Iranian oil exports to zero. We're working with other countries to get alternative supplies for countries that are buying. And I think that's critical over an extended period of time. But let's be clear, we're going to have sanctions that even go beyond this. We're not simply going to be content with the level of sanctions that existed under Obama in 2015. More are coming, and even more important, perhaps, we are actually going to have very strict, very tight enforcement of the sanctions that do exist. Iran right now is in the escape and evasion mode. They're going to try and get around the sanctions. We're determined to prevent that.
I know you're going to announce later today the country specifically in the exemptions, but why the waivers? Why put some in a category of having these waivers and others not?
Yeah, look, I think we've said for a long time zero should mean zero, but some countries that for the last 3 or 4 years had been able to purchase oil from Iran need some time to get down to zero. These are not permanent waivers, no way. We're going to do everything we can to squeeze Iran hard, as the British say, to squeeze them until the pips squeak.
Wow.
And we're going to do everything we can. Their choice, and the mullahs in Tehran, either change their behavior dramatically or face economic disaster.
This weekend I spoke with Prince Al Walid of Saudi Arabia. Tell us the importance of the relationship with the one stability in the region we thought, which was Saudi Arabia, as we face off this behavior from Iran.
Look, we've had a deep and important relationship with Saudi Arabia since Franklin Roosevelt. It is a cornerstone of our policy in the Middle East. And we want to get to the bottom of what happened to Khashoggi. We want the truth. There's no question about it. It's unacceptable behavior. But the relationship is foundational for the United States, and we're going to try everything we can to see it through. The other oil-producing monarchies in the Gulf region are going to depend on that. Israel sees Saudi Arabia as an important and stabilizing factor. And in the struggle for what is really causing tension and danger in the region, Iran, we want Saudi on our side.
I want to get back to that in a second, but here's an op-ed from Rick Perry. Energy Secretary Perry writes this in the Wall Street Journal, the op-ed titled, "The World Can Live Without Iranian Oil." So did America's new role as this energy powerhouse factor into this decision? Maybe the U.S. is at such a level in terms of its own production, we don't need Middle Eastern oil from Iran anyway.
Yeah, well, Rick Perry and the Energy Department have done a fantastic job since the president pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal to talk to other countries, to get their production up, to find oil that's suitable for the refineries in countries that had been purchasing from Iran. We've ramped up our own production in America. I think we can get to a point where nobody responsible needs to buy oil from Iran.
So let me get back to Saudi Arabia and the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The sons of Khashoggi did an interview recently, and they've asked for their father's remains to be returned to the U.S. As I mentioned, Prince Al Walid yesterday with me on Sunday Morning Futures in an exclusive interview. Here's what he said about that investigation.
I think some people in intelligence did follow these orders and sent a group of people to Turkey to engage with Jamal Khashoggi, and clearly something went wrong over there, whereby he was murdered. Let's give some time for the investigation to finish, and I asked Saudi Arabia now publicly through your program to have the investigation made public as soon as possible, so whereby I believe that the Saudi Crown Prince will be 100% vindicated and exonerated.
Ambassador, I realize the relationship with the Saudis is critical, very important in this neighborhood, if you will. But is it MBS to lead? I mean, 1 year ago, we were there in Riyadh. He told me in an interview and to the world he wants to modernize Saudi Arabia. 2 weeks later, he imprisons all of these ministers, Prince Al Walid included. And then a month ago, we learned this horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Is he the guy?
Look, we have heard both from the King and the Crown Prince very strongly in a number of conversations directly with President Trump that they had no involvement in this and that they're both committed to getting to the bottom of it. That's what they've said to us, and we take them at their word that they're going to do that.
What are you going to do in terms of monitoring Iran's behavior and whether or not it warrants further sanctions?
Now, this is the critical phase we're in now, as I say, escape and evasion by Iran. They're going to try and infiltrate the banking systems of other countries. They're going to try and use front companies and cutouts to evade the sanctions. They're going to do all kinds of things. This is what I would say to American companies and any foreign company that wants to do business in the United States. And I'd say it particularly to their investors and to their independent directors on their boards of directors. If you see your company engaged in a transaction that has the word Iran anywhere associated to it, it ought to be like a fire bell in the night. Not only will we have the incredibly important civil enforcement from the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, the Justice Department, criminal investigators are going to be all over this. They've already got a number of important cases against Iran sanctions violators. I think they're going to make this a big priority. There's a lot of risk for any company that comes anywhere close to Iran.
So you're willing to go as far as sanctioning European companies, European investors, if they're doing business with Iran?
If they violate our sanctions. But I tell you, even though we've heard a lot about how the European governments still wish we were in the Iran deal, European businesses have spoken with their feet. They're out of Iran. That's one of the reasons why the Iranian economy is tanking right now. And we're going to ramp this up. This is going to be a big squeeze. That's what President Trump means when he says maximum pressure.
Should we expect retaliation from Iran?
Well, I think they're going to have to make some very hard decisions. You know, if they change their behavior, the president said he's happy to engage them on the whole range of their behavior: support for terrorism, ballistic missiles, conventional military activity in Yemen, in Iraq, and Syria. We're prepared to do that. They need to change their behavior or they will face the economic consequences.